thank you very much, Farm Riders, for your attention for a moment. So we just want to say a few words to mark the passing of Neil Inall OAM. As George said, he was a founding member of Farm Riders. He was also the co-founder of Cox Inall Communications in 1986, and he gave both Daryl and I a job. And I've carried that business forward for a couple of decades, very much in the spirit of Neil. So Neil studied agronomy at Hawkesbury Agricultural College. He worked for New South Wales Ag as an agronomist for a few years, but his love of talking and listening took him into the ABC. And he really was a pioneer in the late 60s and the 70s into rural broadcasting. He did a national Sunday morning radio program that's now called Australia All Over. He was the host of ABC Countrywide. He generated a lot of content and got the ABC taking the bush seriously. He was also the host of a TV program called Cross Country on 7 Networks, which Daryl's going to talk about in a tick. And he absolutely loved ag science and gave huge amounts of his time to speak at ag colleges around Australia about careers in agriculture. For those of you who knew him, and I think there's a few faces in the room who do, he was truly a gentleman. And all of us who worked at Cox Inall learned a lot about what communications really is, whether you're running a meeting, you're giving an after-dinner speech, or you're pitching a TV show to a network. It's all about the enthusiasm for the storytelling. So Neil was born in 1933 and he died 2 weeks ago, aged 92. Daryl.
In reflecting on the life of Neil Inall, there are many words that might recommend themselves, but I've landed on 3. Those are curious, positive, or as Tim said, enthusiastic, and generous. Firstly, curious. Someone once said that a true journalist is fascinated with everyone but themselves. Neil, I don't think, could be described as self-disregarding in the way that suggests, but he certainly had the curiosity of a true journalist. There was literally nothing he could not muster an interest in. Whether it was the story that he was working on, or for which he was simply reading the intro, or things he found overwhelming, like the explosion of data and information that he was experiencing that prompted him to undertake studies in information management in the late 1990s. He said to me one day, "Dazzler, what are we going to do about all this data, all this information?" I'm not sure he understood what he was studying, but he was curious to a fault. But he probably reserved his greatest interest for what was happening in the life and endeavours of the person that he was speaking to at that moment, which made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Secondly, positive or enthusiastic. Neil's outlook on life was unerringly cheerful and uplifting. He didn't fail to see or experience sorrow, but he saw the good in people and their potential. And so many of us have benefited from that. Finally, generous. My story is, I'm sure, just one of many of Neil's generosity in support of those who it was in his power to help. I was a young ag economist with an ambition to be an ag journo, and I found myself one Saturday morning in, I think, 1992, across the table from Neil and Stuart McLennan, who was co-owner of Cross Country, interviewing to write the commodity markets reports for Cross Country. And so began a friendship which, in which Neil supported and guided my growth and rejoiced in my successes. Neil's generous support and encouragement was the foundation of what's now a 30-year career in ag communications. And as I said, there would be dozens who could tell that same story. So to the curious, positive, enthusiastic, generous Neil Inall, who's still recalled fondly by many as the face of rural Australia, thanks for being you.